Hi, BookTube. It's Jess again. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about why I have decided to pursue self publishing for my historical novel. The novel that I'm writing, or that I've written, and I am hopefully just doing the final line edits on after many years of working on it, is set, it begins around 1570 in Scotland. It focuses on the court of King James VI, starting with his childhood and the regencies, moving up to his first encounter with a favorite, a sexy favorite. This is about his cousin Esme Stuart, who became the Duke of Lennox. And so these are the favorites from the Scottish period, long before, the English, crown, long before, he met, Robert Carr or George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham. I first started working on the novel in 2016. I'd thought about it on and off over the years, and I spent a semester researching, and then I started writing in the summer of 2016. Worked on it on and off for that year, and then about a year later, Britta Bowler from the Second Shelf reached out to me because she was working on a novel and she knew that I was working on one. And we ended up starting a writing group with a fellow YouTuber at the time, Mel Martin. And so they took me through two complete revisions, or the initial writing of the novel and then a full revision of the novel. And then after that, I just spent another year or two just working on it, revising it, doing all the things that you do, unlearning things, right? Relearning things, dealing with all of the big historical info dumps that needed to go, cutting out words, taking the manuscript from a shocking 137,000 words down to I think somewhere maybe it was around 96,000 at the time. And I was gearing up to query because, my intention was to do what everyone I know does in the world that I live, and that is to pursue a conventional publishing contract. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I did have the good fortune to attend the Historical Novels Society conference in the summer of 2021. I'm pretty sure it was that summer. Ended up meeting a bunch of indie writers, ended up having a mentor who herself was an indie writer. And I learned a lot about querying. I attended a querying session, got some feedback from an agent, just heard about what people were working on, popped into a few of the themed kind of happy hour rooms. So I met a number of writers at the time and ended up ordering some of their books, even though I didn't read them right away. But at that time, I really was not, intending to pursue independent publishing. Why? Well, I'm an academic. I live in a world in which everything you do is peer reviewed. And I generally accept the idea that as an academic, I should be peer reviewed. Peers, people with more experience than I, should be able to review my work and determine whether it's going to make an original contribution to the discipline. And it may be that they don't like my work or that, but if it's well written and it makes an original contribution, then generally, it's worth publishing. And whether you find a publisher right away or not, that's a whole other question. But I think in the professional publishing world, when it comes to fiction, there are a couple of levels. One could be personal taste, that is the novel of interest to the agent? And if it is, can the agent find, an editor to sell it to who will also find it interesting? But there's also the element of, is it marketable? Is it going to make a bucket load of money, or is it going to make enough money for that agent to find that writer to be worth their time as far as, working on the book, getting out and selling the book, developing a relationship with that author for future books. So they're similar, but they're different. And again, not everybody who gets a PhD and writes a dissertation finds themselves publishing easily. Many people leave the profession. Many people leave jobs and start over somewhere else because they've struggled to make it to tenure. But I think with the independent publishing world, there is an alternative to getting a novel published. And in terms of my own personal journey with with querying, I didn't even query that many agents, to be honest. I'm not going to give an exact number, but I hear of people who query 50, who query 100. I didn't get close to 50. I did start querying in the fall of 2021, and initially I was excited. I had a couple of people I'd really researched to the best of my ability what people were interested in, what books were on their list, etc. I did all the things that you do to try to find out who's the perfect agent for me, and got some very quick rejections from people. Looking back, I was really grateful that I did, in fact, get rejection letters, because this is a professional area in which no one really feels obligated necessarily to tell you no, right? They just will never respond to your letter. And I realize some agents pride themselves, right, on making sure that they respond quickly and that they let people know, not interested, thanks, but no thanks. But there are a whole lot of agencies out there where you never hear from them, or they'll make it clear if you haven't heard in 2 to 3 months, we're not interested, take it as a no. So I wasn't, completely put out by the fact that I wasn't getting rejection letters from all of the agents that I queried. And in some cases, I was getting a rejection letter 6 to 8 months after I had, initially sent it. So I understand that agents are incredibly busy. They only make money. They're only making money once they sell a book, and that they get an excessive number of queries for books that they're not interested in. And whether that number of queries rose significantly during and after COVID, I've kind of heard that it has. So there are even more people flooding, right, the email inboxes, right, of agents, and they're probably publishing fewer books than they were 5 years ago. So I get it. I get that it's a very difficult thing. I had thought very seriously for a while about continuing to query after taking a break. What did I do when I didn't get any responses from anybody with any kind of criticism or anything specific other than this sounds interesting, but it's not right for my list, which is pretty much what you hear from people most of the time. I just started working on the novel again, and I took it through multiple revisions. I ended up getting a second set of beta readers through the History Quill, which is a writing service, kind of thing in the UK. But the readers who agreed to or were interested in reading my book gave me a lot of great feedback. And it made me realize that there is a readership out there for my books, albeit a much smaller one than there would be if I were writing an historical romance or maybe an historical mystery. I, up until a couple months ago, I was ready to go. I was gearing up. I was gearing up to hop right back in to the querying trenches. But something happened. I ended up looking back at a book I had purchased a couple years ago after attending the Historical Novels Society conference. And during that period, I met a woman named Libby Hawker. Olivia Hawker might be, I can't remember, she's writing under multiple pen names. She wrote a book that's called Take Off Your Pants. It's about plotting your novel rather than pantsing your novel. And she also has a book called How to Make It in Historical Fiction. At any rate, I ended up purchasing this book because I was hoping for the next novel to be able to write more intentionally from the beginning with fewer gaffes and setbacks. And I also wanted to read it to see what she had to say, if there was something beneficial for the current manuscript that I was working on. But that entire time, it never really occurred to me that I would want to do the independent route rather than the traditional publishing route. But after I relooked at her books, I started thinking about my experience at the Historical Novels Society. In particular, the very intense interaction I had with the woman who had been assigned my mentor, the late Anna Castle. I can't remember what her name was, but Anna Castle is the pen name that she writes under, and she has a series, I think it's called Mrs. Moriarty, but she also has this wonderful series, or at least the first book I really enjoyed reading, about Francis Bacon at the Inns of Court as a young lawyer, I believe, not as a student. And when I met with her, she gave me some really helpful, somewhat harsh, tactless advice, but one of the things that we talked about, was my period. And she had said, "Oh, you probably just want to go the independent route." And I was taken aback, but I sat with her and we talked about it, and she basically said that a lot of people who are writing about less popular historical periods, so if you're not writing about World War II, if you're not writing about the Restoration, I don't even know if people care about the Restoration. If you're not writing about Henry VIII and all his wives, if you're not writing about Queen Elizabeth or Mary Queen of Scots, or a handful of other areas that people just gravitate to, must read the next World War II novel, that it might, in fact, make sense to go the independent route. When I sat in on the English Civil War, um, sort of coffee hour, cocktail hour, that was what I was hearing from a lot of the writers in that room, that English Civil War is not something that agents and because conventional publishers are not generally interested in it. And I figured the same was probably true for the post Mary Queen of Scots, period in Scotland as well. So, at the time I was just like, nah, I'm gonna do independent. I'm not gonna do independent publishing. It's not for me. But more and more I've started to think recently that it might be the right choice for me. One, I am perfectly content to take critiques from anyone who offers critiques of my work. If I'd ever gotten to the point where the agent had asked for a full manuscript and they had given me some feedback, even if it was very general and generic, I most certainly would have taken it to heart. I would be more than happy to have had a professional editor force me to rewrite the whole novel again. The reality, though, is that didn't happen, and I don't think it's going to happen if I suddenly change my mind today and start querying tomorrow. I do realize that there is a certain sort of pressure now to make sure it's a really good novel. Not that I didn't feel that pressure before for agents, but now it's 100% on me. If it's sorely lacking, if there are typos, if there are issues, with production, if I pick the wrong cover art, it's all on me, and I'm the one that's going to have to, sort of face the music as far as that's concerned. Do I value the work that professional editors and professional, agents do? Of course. But let's face it, a project about a 26-year-old Calvinist who goes to court and suddenly is in a different world and realizes that his religious and political worldview are fairly narrow, that the world that he's entering into is much more complex. Realizing, that the world is bigger, also becoming very emotionally invested in the well-being of the king, and then becoming ultimately involved in some spycraft, which will lead to trying to figure out if the king's favorite, in fact, is an agent of Rome or is working for the Guises. Is he really going to destroy the nation? That's about the most drama that we're getting in my novel, even though there are many, characters that I've, enjoyed taking my time, hopefully developing in some fashion. I want to publish this novel, and I want it to be my first of many, not a novel that I throw in the drawer as a failed experiment. So if it turns out that it should be thrown in the drawer as a failed experiment, I'll probably learn that from any reviews that people bother to leave on Amazon, KDP. Anyway, I am making the move to move forward. I'm working with a student who's a marketing major and a graphic design minor. And this is a student that I know because she works in my department. So we talked. I'm basically going to be working with her to develop a cover. So no doubt some of you that I know well, I'll be reaching out to you to see what you think of, the possible cover ideas. My original plan was a May 15th launch date, simply because it's after the semester is over. And even though I'll have a ton of work to do between now and then, that was I figured that would be great. It would give me the rest of the summer to do additional sort of marketing things, including taking advantage of programs like the Indie Authors Project, which is a means to actually get your books into libraries. Like, they do a review, and if they think it's sufficient or good quality, then they recommend it to libraries. Not to mention all the other things that I'll be needing to do. And so, I'm just going to do it. Once I made the decision, I felt lighter. I felt less discouraged and less depressed about the whole situation. Um, I don't know very many independent writers in my world. Most people are doing it the conventional way, but you know what? I'm willing to be a trailblazer as far as that's concerned. And there are at least two people that I know from YouTube, including Britta, who are thinking about doing self publishing, following that path. And of course, everyone, you all know that Britta has published 5 novels conventionally with a traditional publisher, not to mention many other or several other works of nonfiction. I think that. Uh, I think that this is a legitimate path. I think it's an appropriate path for me given my circumstances and my expectations, or my expectations for myself. And we'll just see how it goes. I will keep you posted. I probably, when I finally get a cover, will do a cover reveal. Um, if you look at my about info down below, you'll see that I have my webpage, jessicatavorti.com. That's my author website. Doesn't have a ton of information on it. It has like a 1 sentence blurb about the novel, and I will be actually uploading what the cover, description of the novel is probably within the next month or so. I do have a blog that I started, and I'm not quite sure the timing yet, but I will be blogging pretty regularly. You can sign up for a newsletter on that website if you'd like. Again, I'm unclear about timing, so I'm not sure at what point I really should start doing a newsletter. I mean, I feel like February 1st would be maybe a little too premature if the book isn't coming out until May, but I'm figuring these things out. And fortunately, there are a ton of millennials who write YA and publish 2+ books a year, who are on AuthorTube on YouTube, who know how to use all this stuff. Like they know how to use all the software. They know how to work with, all of the different organizations that will help you publish, like Kindle, but also Ingram Spark and Direct to Digital and others. And so I've learned a ton from them. I mean, they're real hustlers. They've figured it all out, and there are a lot of great videos out there that really are going to give you the how-tos of all of this. And so at any rate, I hope you will stick around for the journey and maybe consider reading my book at some point when it comes out. But I'll keep people posted about that. And hopefully next week I'll have something that's more book related about what I'm reading. Anyway, thanks so much for your time. And, please leave comments and questions below. And I'm certainly interested again in your thoughts. Are you reading indie books? Have you thought about self-publishing? Have you self-published? What has your experience been? What is your attitude towards self-published works? I think that given the attitude of many of my friends about the mediocrity of books that get nominated for prizes, I just feel like I'm more open than I was 3 or 4 years ago to what I'm willing to read. And, I'm hoping that other people will be open and will also consider reading a book that is self published. Anyway, that's all for now. I'll be speaking with you next week.